Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin meets with Kenya's Defense Minister Aden Duale in Nairobi Monday, his second stop in his three-nation tour of Africa. We'll have a live report from Nairobi. The mayor of Libya's eastern city of Derna is detained alongside other officials on suspicion of mismanagement and negligence over the collapse of dams that flooded the city 2 weeks ago. And an inspirational story of a former gang member who grew up in an impoverished neighborhood in Kenya, but now a nationally recognized swordsman. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin our broadcast in the Horn of Africa, where calm has mostly been restored in Ethiopia's Amhara region on Monday after new fighting erupted in the town of Gondar as militiamen battled with the military over the government's plan to disarm local forces. Residents say fighters from a militia called Fano fought against military units Sunday. The Ethiopian National Defense Forces, in a statement released on a verified Facebook account, confirmed the clashes, adding that the government security forces thwarted militia attacks. For more insight on the Fano militia and the clashes in Amhara, VOA's Paul Ndiho spoke with Yosef Haile, a Washington-based Ethiopian activist.
In the Amhara region right now, a war is going on. Actually, the war is between the Ethiopian National Defense Force and Amhara people. I can say that because Amhara people represented by Fano, the government is claiming to disarm Fano and silence the Amhara people. That's a war. Which was started actually about 6 months ago in April, but the government just formally announced the war, the command post, a month ago.
There are some people who say that Fano is a rebel movement, an organization that wants to overthrow Abiy Ahmed's government. How do you respond to that?
It's an Amharic word representing Amhara patriots who is defending the peace and the security and the freedom of the Amhara people. They took the initiative by themselves without any payment and without waiting for any weapons. They use whatever is at hand, and they march to the war front. What's happening in the Amhara region is Fano is trying to defend the Amhara people from the attacks and invasions successively launched on them by the Oromo extremists for the past 30 years.
You specifically talked about the Oromia extremists. Now, what's that got to do with the current government?
Since the Prime Minister Abiy came to power, these killings and persecutions became systemic. The government structure, the forces, the authorities were used to displace the Amharas from Oromia region, to kill them.
But yes, sir, we live in a world where we all have phones that can record. A lot of us have access to the internet. Even in the Amhara, even during the war in Tigray, people had access to telephones, people would share things on social media. I have not seen people using their phones or people using other means to record, send sound, or anything to suggest that a genocide has been happening in the Amhara region.
In southern Ethiopian region, in Gurafarda, there was mass killings, but all of these incidents were not isolated. They were planned and systemic.
You have a lot of concerns, and your concerns are varied. What should Abiy Ahmed's regime do to help out the Amhara people?
The way out here is, at this time, at this moment, is to go for a transitional government, which includes all opposition parties in the country, brings them together, and all stakeholders participate in the coming new system for Ethiopia.
Violence gripped Amhara, Ethiopia's second most populous state, in early August, with Fano fighters seizing control of several major towns and protesters blocking roads. The military retook control after several days. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has wrapped up talks with the Kenyan Defense Minister on Monday about security and counterterrorism. Prior to his arrival in Kenya, Secretary Austin was in Djibouti, where he met with Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud as part of his first visit to the African continent as Defense Secretary. On Sunday, Austin met with the Djiboutian President Ismail Omar Guelleh and the nation's defense minister, thanking them for hosting the United States' primary base in Africa and for supporting Somalia in its fight against extremist groups. While in Kenya, Austin spoke about the close ties the U.S. has with the East African nation.
I look forward to meeting with President Ruto later today to discuss our strategic partnership. Now, the U.S. government deeply values our partnership with Kenya in countering al-Shabaab. We're grateful to Kenya for its leadership in tackling security challenges in the region and around the world. And I also thank the Secretary today for Kenya's willingness to consider leading a multinational security support mission in Haiti.
For more on U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's visit to Africa, I'm joined live via Skype from Nairobi by VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb. Carla, to begin with, fill us in on Secretary Austin's visit to Africa and what he said about France pulling its forces out of Niger.
Well, good evening, Esther. Thanks for having me. It has been a very busy time for the Secretary of Defense. This is his first trip to Africa as Secretary of Defense, and it's the first time that any U.S. Defense Secretary has visited Kenya since 1976. He praised the Kenyans for their support with the fight against al-Shabaab, especially with their support towards the Somali government. As you had mentioned earlier, he met with the Somali president, and he pointed out that while it is still a tough fight against al-Shabaab, he said the Somali forces had made more progress in the last year than they had in the past 5 years combined. So he was basically urging the community to stay with the support to the Somali government and to not only fight militarily, but to also look for ways to solve the problem, that the real deep problem there, and that's the poverty level and the economic situation. He turned to Niger as he was talking to reporters because France, as you know, has said they will pull out their forces by the end of the year. And so reporters asked him, is the U.S. going to follow that? And he said France can make their own decisions. But as for the United States, we still have our forces in Niger. There are about 1,000 U.S. forces in Niger. They have moved from the capital to a base in Agadez called Air Base 201. That's about 1,000 kilometers away. But other than that, the big basic numbers have not changed. However, they're not doing counterterrorism operations right now because of the situation, the political situation in Niger. U.S. military forces have stopped doing all counterterrorism missions with Nigerians. They are conducting intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance missions, but that is just for force protection of American forces.
What more did Lloyd Austin discuss with his counterpart in Kenya, Aden Duale, and did they mention anything about Kenya's troops going to Haiti?
They did. In fact, the United States is going to commit $100 million to help the Kenyans in their peace missions that they're going to be having in Haiti. And they have encouraged, the Defense Secretary encouraged other nations to follow suit with the Kenyans. He praised them for being a leader in several countries when it comes to peacekeeping. And that was something that the Kenyans were very proud of. And they said that they have stepped up to the plate and they will continue to step up to the plate.
Do you see any common theme between the three countries? He's heading to Angola after he leaves Nairobi. What's the common theme between Djibouti, Kenya, and Angola?
Well, the common thread between Djibouti and Kenya is clearly the counter-terror fight and the fact that they have long-standing, close military ties with the United States. Djibouti is home to the major military base for the United States. About 5,000 U.S. military personnel are in Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti. Kenya also has a base that hosts U.S. forces, Manda Bay. The secretary is going to be going there tomorrow. And Angola is a little different because Angola is where the United States is trying to create and build the military ties and the economic ties as well. He said that he was asked to go by Angolan leaders, and he's happy to go and start that conversation.
Carla, many thanks for your reporting. VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb reporting live for us from Nairobi, Kenya. French President Emmanuel Macron says France is pulling its soldiers out of Niger following a July coup in the West African country. The move is a huge blow to French influence and counterinsurgency operations in the Sahel region. Macron says 1,500 troops will withdraw by the end of the year and that France and the former colonial power in Niger refuse to be held hostage by putschists. France's exit, which comes after weeks of pressure from the junta and popular demonstrations, is likely to exacerbate Western concerns over Russia's expanding influence in Africa. The Russian mercenary force Wagner is already present in Niger's neighbor Mali. France is refusing to recognize the junta as Niger's legitimate authority, but Macron says Paris will coordinate its troop withdrawal with coup leaders. The mayor of Libya's eastern city of Derna was detained along with other officials on suspicion of mismanagement and negligence over the collapse of dams that flooded the city 2 weeks ago, according to the Libya Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office says it has issued orders to detain 8 local officials over the collapse of dams in a storm which unleashed a massive wall of water that swept neighborhoods into the sea, killing thousands. Those detained included the mayor and an official in charge of water resources. Angry residents are blaming the authorities for the collapse of the dams, which had been built to hold back the flow into the seasonal riverbed running through the city. Malawi has faced chronic food insecurity for years, but a 110% increase in maize prices from the previous year have made the situation worse. Chimwemwe Padata reports from Lilongwe.
Malawi is facing natural and man-made challenges that are causing food insecurity. In February, the country was hit by Cyclone Freddy, which washed away thousands of hectares of crops in the south. The price of maize, a staple crop, has risen 110% compared to the previous year, according to an August report by the Famine Early Warning Systems Network. That has left many families scrambling to pay for essential food items, says Davison Kugu, a maize trader.
Things are not good this year. Prices of maize have gone up, and it is hard for most people to purchase. A 50-kilogram bag of maize is now selling at $43, which is an equivalent of 47,000 kwacha. This is too high for families to afford.
A recent maize market report by the International Food Policy Research Institute, or IFPRI, shows that prices of maize in Malawi are among the highest in Africa's southern countries. Jan Dushoslav, an IFPRI research fellow based in Malawi, said the situation is partially caused by challenges to the implementation of the Affordable Inputs Program, a government program that allows farmers to purchase farm inputs at a subsidized cost.
Official production estimates show that there should be just about enough maize in the country. Chances are that, given how high prices are going, that there is less. High prices and the scarcity of fuel probably did not help much either recently. It's expensive to move food around. There's big uncertainty about what will happen with the input subsidy program going into the next harvest, next growing season.
Amhara of the Center for Social Concern, a social justice advocacy institution, blames the high maize prices on a lack of food security policies.
This bill was drafted by Department of Nutrition in collaboration with civil society organizations way back, but up to now the bill hasn't been brought into Parliament to deliberate.
World Food Programme country representative Paul Tenbu says that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has contributed to the current food insecurity.
The war between Russia and Ukraine has hit global food security, and Malawi has not been spared. We remember that the fertilizer prices are already going up sharply in 2021, but in 2022 they doubled with the onset of the war. A large amount of the fertilizer that is traded globally comes from Russia and Ukraine.
An estimated 4.4 million Malawians are likely to face hunger in the 2023-2024 consumption period, making up 22% of the country's population, according to the August 2023 Malawi Vulnerability Assessment Committee report published by the government. Despite this, the government says it has yet to fill up the grain reserves to ease access to the staple grain for those in dire need of food assistance. Chimwe Barata, VOA News, Lilongwe, Malawi.
Grace Villa is a home and sanctuary for orphans, abandoned and abused children located in Kabale, Western Uganda. The villa caters to over 200 children between ages 3 to 21. The children are taught how to read and other life skills. For more on the care given to those orphans, I'm joined by Ruth Diabahika, the founder of Grace Villa. Ruth, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm curious to know what motivated you to start and open Grace Villa.
Well, first of all, I'm really, really excited to be here and honored. Thank you for hosting me. So 9 years ago, I lived in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm an early childhood care specialist and a child psychologist. 10 years ago, I moved from Boston to my village, which is in the hills, the beautiful hills of Kabale, to open this safe space. It's a home and a safe space for girls who are at risk, orphaned, abandoned, abused, rescued from early marriages, and we give them a safe space to be, and like you mentioned before, an education in all sorts of ways, both vocational and mainstream education. So partly it was my background that motivated me. Another part of that is the family that I grew up in. I'm a double PK, which is a daughter of 2 Reverend Canons, and our home was that kind of home, a home of African generosity.
Right.
And then also there was a big, like Oprah says, aha moment where it's a story, but I'll try to break it down and make it short. I watched a documentary, and you know the power of a visual like this one right here. It was called Invisible Children, about the atrocities carried out by Connie.
I want us to move on to what you're doing right now, because we have very limited time. You have very young children, you have some young adults. How do you cater for their different needs?
So one of our main objectives is not to raise children who are askers, but children who try to solve situations for themselves. So of course we do need support, and that is one of the things that has helped us get where we are, our community and kind people out there. But also we focus very much on our sustainability projects. One of them is this tailoring, like pretty much everything I wear these days is made by our kids. We do agriculture, we focus on really good education, and many of our kids are on bursaries. We have sports scholarships, and basically we try to find creative ways to be able to fund the many things that you can imagine we need to raise a home full of of 30 girls in the home and over 400 children in the community.
You look for relatives of these children to be able to reunite them so they don't stay in the villa for so long. How is that going, and how do you ensure their safety once they are with foster care or they are with other relatives?
Yeah. Sadly, the traditional ways of caring for kids is kind of eroded. And not anyone's fault. Well, more to do with poverty, you know, the disease that's scavenged with HIV and all that. So sometimes it's hard to even find families that exist for these children. But our first course of action when we get these children who are brought to us by our Uganda government, the police and probation, is to try to find their homes. But for those who we fail to find homes, then we provide that safe haven out of Grace Villa. But yes, our first course of action is to look for relatives and to support those relatives so that they're able to raise these children the right way.
I have Only 30 seconds left for you. You say in your article that Uganda has the highest rate of teenage pregnancies. What do you think is the contributing factor and what can be done? Very briefly.
Tradition, like I mentioned, extreme poverty, and also the fact that girls are looked at, sadly, as a commodity. Like if a family is struggling, they will sell her off, give her off to early marriage, or to, you know, if they have a boy and a girl in the home, chances are they'll give the girl away to raise funds to put the boy through school. So we saw a lot of this during COVID, like it really exacerbated during COVID. And it's a sad situation, but one that we are determined to tackle with the community and with everyone who's listening here today.
Yes, Grace, we support that a lot. The girls have to go to school as well as boys. It's equal opportunity here. Thank you very much for what you've been doing in Kabale. Continue doing that good job.
Thank you so much.
All right. Ruth Diambahika is the founder of Grace Villa in Kabale, Uganda. Still to come, a Kenyan man's journey from gang member to nationally recognized swordsman. We will explain after this short break.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linoch Mudu, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
In other news, the breakaway region of Somaliland says it has no plans to discuss unity with Somalia, appearing to contradict Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, who says he would act as a unification mediator between the two governments. The African Development Bank said last week it has programs in over 30 African countries that have helped produce some $12 billion worth of food. ADB President Akiwumi Adesina says in part, quote, "We shouldn't be talking about food security in Africa more than 5 years from now." And we have some good news to report concerning Africa's rhino population. Conservationists say rhino numbers grew across the continent last year. Over 23,000 rhinos roamed Africa at the end of 2022. That's up 5.2% from 2021, according to the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Growing up in an impoverished Kenyan neighborhood, Buru Wanyoike's journey from gang member to nationally recognized swordsman is unlikely, as it is inspirational. Saida Swale reports from Nairobi.
These are the streets of Huruma, a well-known low-income area in Nairobi, Kenya. Buru Wanyoike grew up here.
So all these places that I've been living, back then they were known to be not great places to live. Crime rate was really high, and the people I grew around with, they were the people that usually here they are called the thugs and the gangsters and so forth.
Wanyoike wanted to fit in and was introduced to a group of young men who wanted him to join their criminal activities. He was the youngest.
Reached a place whereby I started carrying guns for them. So I carried them guns when they were going to maybe robbery and stuff.
But not anymore. He says a sense of loss convinced him to leave his life of crime behind.
Those who were my friends back then, but all of them, most of them are dead, and others are in jail. And it was horrible. When I remember about those times, I feel it's really painful.
Wanyoike is now a professional fencer in the Kenya National Fencing Federation team and a coach. He competed at tournaments in Cairo last year and in Milan, Italy this July. He started his own fencing club, Savora Fencing, in 2021. Now he trains young people at risk like Jemima Waheto.
I like it because we used different things. Even if you ask some people what is fencing, they don't know. But now they are coming to know because we are starting to advertise it.
Another student, Victor Odhiambo, had his family baffled when he mentioned the sport.
My mother, she told me that, what's fencing first of all? So she don't know this sport because this sport is the new sport in this country.
Despite the constant challenges of lack of equipment, training space and sponsorship, Wanyoike hopes that the lessons will have an impact on the youth.
I wouldn't want them to be in the same life I was, because they're in the same neighborhood, and that's what I'm trying to change in their mind, that don't let the environment that you are define you. I wouldn't want to see them getting into crime.
Fencing helped Wanyoike cope mentally, physically and emotionally, and he hopes his students will feel the same way. Saida Swale, VOA News, Nairobi, Kenya.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.
And no nation can meet the challenges of today alone. We also recognize that to meet the new challenges of our decades-old institutions and approaches, they must be updated to keep peace with the world. We have to bring in more leadership and capability that exists everywhere, especially from regions that have not always been fully included. In my address to this body last year, I announced the United States will support expanding the Security Council, increasing the number of permanent and non-permanent members. And we'll continue to do our part to push more reform efforts forward. Look for points of common ground and make progress in the year ahead. The United Nations must continue to preserve peace, prevent conflict, and alleviate human suffering. At this inflection point in history, we're going to be judged by whether or not we live up to the promises we made to all those who will inherit the world we create. Let's do this work together. Let's